And so there's a way that the feminine can orient us to where we are in space and time. Like out of all these possibilities of where we could be in the cosmos and where we could be in the expression of time, like here we are right now. And so it's very contextual. If you don't feel held by something, you got to have something else to grasp onto. And, so our culture is kind of obsessed with acquiring content to replace the fact that we're not connected to something deeper and more real.
The big hormone Enneagram.
Hi, I'm John Lukovich, sexual self-pres 4-5 wing, 4-5-8 trifix.
Hi, I'm David Gray, self-pres sexual 9-1, 9-7-4 trifix.
What up, it's Emeka. I'm an 8-wing-7, sexual self-pres with 8-5-4 fixes.
Hi, I'm Nancy. I am a self-pres social 3, wing 4, with a 3-6-9 trifix. If you like our podcast, guys, make sure you go like and subscribe on the Apple Podcast app. And if you really like us, you should definitely leave us a review.
Welcome back to Low Vibrational Living with Big Hormone Enneagram. We are back with my friend Julie to explore the archetypal feminine through the lens of the Enneagram and the centers. Before we do that, we got our usual plugs because this is a free podcast, and so we need money somehow. So please buy my book, and if you've bought my book, please rate or write a review of my book on whatever site you bought it from, please. I'm also doing a study group on Sundays, 4 p.m. Eastern via Zoom. $15 donation per class or recorded video. It's been going really well and very interesting, and we just go into detail through my book, exploring a lot of topics that I just couldn't fit in the book. And it's been it's been a great, not only from the point of view of able to talk about interesting stuff, but it's like a good social instinct group that I didn't know would happen.
Social. You didn't know social would happen.
I didn't know social would happen, and it's been happening, and it's been happening really well. So people are like, let's do breakout rooms and stuff like this. I'm like, okay.
What is that?
Yeah, right. And people's self-observations and things like that are really good material, and it's been just a very good, I think working together is giving people a really good orientation for working with the Enneagram, not just knowing it cognitively. So that's been good. What else we got?
DAA, Dark Arts Academy. Recently, we had done some classes on sevens, dark sevens. I know,
Dark sevens.
Yeah, because there's so many sevens we've typed recently that for some reason there's been a influx of sevens, and most sevens don't relate to the positive connotations around seven. And so we want to do a class exploring the frustration of sevens and how sevens can really be negative. And so that's cool. We also did a class on rejection fixes. We've done a lot on rejection on here, but we wanted to explore. I think some people had some questions like, what about the rejection fixes? What are some implications for that? So we did some classes, or we did a class where we looked at 3 people. Let's see, who did we look at? We looked at what's the guy that did Parts Unknown? What's his name, David?
Anthony Bourdain.
Anthony Bourdain for 8-fix. The chick who studies monkeys, what's her name?
Jane Goodall.
Jane Goodall. Horrible with names. I the images are so clear, but I can't.
I'm usually not this on point.
Jane Goodall, and we did FKA Twigs. She has an 8-wing as well. So we explored the different ways.
Fix.
Yeah,
8-wing. You're right.
8-wing. Yeah, we explored the different ways. Rejection can show up in terms of typing, and also I think, what do we have coming up next?
No idea.
We're doing the stackings. We're doing social self-pres and self-pres social.
Nice.
A typing special. So yeah, join DAA because we're learning how to see with the eyes and the instruments of the Enneagram, becoming more fluent with these concepts. It's not enough just to know these things, but you have to actually experience them to be able to use them. So that's what we're learning to do with DAA.
And David Triffick's book. And then if you want to get typed, come to us. If you want to do coaching, come to us. That's it, I think, right?
Yeah.
All right, cool. So back with Julie Harris, my friend. We did New York Enneagram together. Julie is a coach and a breath worker. Her website is riverbendcoaching.com. Anything else you want to say about yourself and how people can reach you, Julie?
Sure. Yeah. So sign up for my mailing list if you want to hear about what I've got upcoming. I've just started doing some group breathwork sessions, and the first one sold out in 12 hours. So if you want to get in, make sure you're on the mailing list so you could hear about it. And
is that online or in person? That kind of stuff.
That is online. It's virtual. Yeah. So people from all over the world can participate. I'm working on putting together some other offerings around helping people who work with people one-on-one with the Enneagram, and how you can be more creative and experiential in working with your clients. And I'm also going to be doing something in the new year that I'm tentatively titled The Sacred in the Ordinary. And it's going to be building off a lot of the things we've been talking about here on the moon cycle, about like immersing yourself in like this cycle of emptiness, fullness, and just kind of seeing how it is to not grasp for something, but be held in something. So lots of good new things coming up. So sign up for my mailing list.
Cool. All right, let's do it.
Okay. I thought we could do another short practice to kind of bring us into the space of what we're talking about with the feminine. This is another practice from Maya Luna. And just start by noticing, like, don't change anything, but just notice, like, where is your torso, your chest, your head relative to your pelvis? Like, are you leaning forward? Are you leaning backward? Are you exactly over your pelvis? And for most of us, our culture encourages us to lean forward, to kind of like lean out of ourselves and into the moment, into the next moment, kind of come up and out of ourselves. And I think this work with the feminine helps us to root back and down and be supported and held by something. So wherever you are with your torso, like consciously move so that you're in alignment right over your center. And really notice the back of your pelvis and the back of your heart and the back of your skull, so that you're sensing into a kind of holding that you might discover here. Right? When we're always kind of pulling up and forward, we don't feel held at all. It's kind of like got to keep the momentum going. So letting yourself come into the back body. And then imagining that you could, from this place, kind of like drop a line down, drop an anchor down through your pelvis and into the earth, so that you're coming into the depth of this moment. And Maya calls this practice co-regulating with the earth. There's a way that we can just really allow ourselves to release into the depth of this very moment, embodied moment. Somebody else who times I hear her centering, she talks about being generous and giving your weight to the earth, like not withholding yourself. Be generous, give yourself down, and let yourself be received. So again, it's just another very simple way that we can step into this quality of holding and receptivity. That's the feminine. And then when you're ready, you can open your eyes. You guys have any thoughts about that experience that you want to share? Nancy, you're muted. I think you're talking, but you're muted.
I was telling my dogs to shut up.
Okay.
That part of the feminine.
They're bothering me.
Buddy.
Well, I don't know what I think is interesting. Like I end up working with a lot of people of like, I think I said last time, like all different ages and sexualities and whatever, but on their sexual instinct and sexuality, and like no matter like type and stacking or whatever, it's like generally speaking, people are really not in touch with their pelvis at all. And I often describe how like the pelvis and the genitals are like such a good they're sense organs in the sense of like giving us information about people and circumstances and stuff like that, like and it's not necessarily like sexual explicitly, like I want to have sex or not. It's just like it's like your genitals will respond to people in an intelligent body-based way, and a lot of times we're just not listening to all that input, and it's all coming from up here. And I also think it's coming from, I like the way you described how we're kind of leaning forward into the next moment, where there is a certain way that there's like an over outcome focus. There's this sort of, it's not just driven, but there's a manipulation in the sense of striving for a particular outcome, and lacking that orientation of like what's actually here, what's actually like arising, and what in me can meet what's arising. That's not just my mental brain. So
Yeah. Yeah. Right. So even just that very like simple of like making sure that your body is lined up. Certainly as a head type, I know my brain wants to lead a lot, and there's just a lot of value on a certain kind of cognition in our society. And so like kind of allowing ourselves to come back and to relax down can change that. And I think actually then that's a perfect jumping off place to talk about the head center through the lens of the feminine. And we started talking about it a little bit last time, the idea that I think the feminine brings us into multiple perspectives about reality, that the truth is complex and faceted, right? The truth of this life is complex and faceted. It's not simple. And we talked about the moon cycle and seeing those different facets of the moon cycle and knowing that they're all an expression of the moon, but something different is happening in every moment of reality. And Sashat is the Egyptian goddess who really personifies this for me. She's kind of a six-ish kind of character. And she's depicted with, she has this plume coming off the top of her head that has 7 flowers. And it feels to me like the way that she is in contact with the cosmos, with the larger cosmos. And then she's usually depicted in front of this vertical line of dots, which represent time. Each dot is a reign of a pharaoh. And she's pointing to one particular dot. And so there's a way that the feminine can orient us to where we are in space and time. Like out of all these possibilities of where we could be in the cosmos and where we could be in the expression of time, like here we are right now. And so it's very contextual, right? We don't lose the idea that there's a bigger story here, but we also get really specific about where we are in that story right now, right? And so there's a discernment in the feminine of this cyclical wisdom of things coming in and out, arising and falling, rising and falling. And sort of our knowledge and our intelligence is our ability to interact with the facet that is emerging now, right? This capacity of intelligence, of knowing how to learn rather than specific content.
mm-hmm.
Not that content is bad, but when that's the only thing, we get really fixed in our ideas about things and our beliefs about things. And then there's this way that in the head center, we can see how the things that we've been talking about in the body and the heart rise up to be spoken as the truth. And we didn't talk about Mott in the heart center, but I just want to mention her for a second. Ma'at is a goddess, and the root of her name, Ma'a, means truth. And so there's this scene in Egypt that a lot of people talk about as the Day of Judgment. Denise, our friend, thinks of it more about just the process of transformation, but it takes place in the Hall of Two Truths. And there's this scale, like you'd see like with the sign of Libra, right? With two different buckets. And on one bucket is your heart. And in the other bucket is the feather of Ma'at, is the feather of truth. And it's like weighing, were you true to your heart? Were you authentic with your heart? Like, where are you in being aligned with your heart in this Hall of Two Truths? And Ma'at is here. And then the way that comes through to the head center is there's a phrase in hieroglyphs called Ma'a Karu, which means true of voice. And we talked in the body center how the feminine is about this vibrational quality, right? And our voice also has a vibrational quality, right? We can create with our voice. And there are certain languages that are acknowledged to have this vibrational quality where you don't even have to know the meaning of what you're saying, but like the sounds themselves kind of carry some kind of transmission, and Sanskrit is one of them. And in Sanskrit, there are 52 phonemes, sounds, and they're called matrikas. And so you can hear in that the root word matrix that we were talking about last time. It means little mothers. And so it's like with your mouth, you have these little mothers in your mouth, and you're creating, like, something comes up from the vibration of your body. It's aligned with the truth of your heart, and you get to create with your voice. Yeah, it just, I don't know. I kind of love that. It kind of connects this generative quality of the feminine, like from the body and then up through the voice. So, you know, when we're in this panoramic vision, which is this quality in the head center of the feminine, then yeah, we're sort of like awake to the whole. We're aware of the whole, and then awake to the merging facet and the truth of what wants to be expressed. And when we're not connected to that, when we feel reactive to that, there can be a real impatience with partial or emerging knowledge. There can be sort of like this push to nail things down before it's really time. There can be a discounting of our intuitive knowing, overvaluing the content of our knowing over capacity and context. And that leads to reductiveness and a narrowing of possibilities. It can lead to adherence to the status quo and like really not being able to listen to all the voices, or trying to rush or ignore the unfolding of wisdom over time. So usually when I'm teaching this in a workshop, this is the last section. And what I have people do is really sit with all the facets that emerged for them during this workshop, right? During this time that we've been talking about the feminine, and really not trying to sort through them in a linear intellectual way, but just like feeling like what felt bright and shining to you, like what felt super clear, what felt like kind of half, oh, I kind of get that maybe, and what felt like is just like a sliver of something, maybe a spark of something, and I don't really know what that's about, or I'm completely in the dark about something, right? And just kind of write all the facets, and then just sit for a second and let yourself feel like what's most important for you right now. Like, you know, maybe you do want to dig more deeply into the thing that you're like, yeah, I get that, I know that. Or maybe you're like, I really don't get that, but I'm so curious about it. And so like just this process of not pre-selecting what's important for you, but just letting yourself be with the panorama of it, and then getting quiet and seeing like what wants to be engaged with now.
No, that's really good. That's at least a good message for me, in the sense of a lot of the rejection stuff is sort of like pre-deciding what something is going to be, because I guess what you're saying with the feminine is like you have to give yourself over to the moment, what might unfold, and there can be sort of like I guess in all our different ways we can sort of preemptively lock down on experience and pre-decide on what's, or even try to make or shape what something is going to be.
Yeah.
I was showing terribly to the awful camera my tattoo, which is of Shashat. And what's one of the things that's interesting about Shashat is, there's this whole ceremony called the stretching of the cord, where when they were going to build a new temple or a new pyramid or whatever, they'd have this whole ritual where they would literally stretch some cords and like put these monuments in alignment with other monuments, as well as like certain stars, like the seven petals on that kind of flower that come out of her crown, Shashat's crown. Supposedly, one theory is that they represent the 7 stars of the constellation of what we call the bear now, or like the Big Dipper or whatever. For them, it represented the eternal, unmoving point in the sky where all the stars seemingly orbit around. And it's like how that eternal, timeless place is translated into something that's relational and time-based. And so one of the things that I thought was interesting, Julie, that you're speaking to, that I think that we kind of have brought to some of the ways the Enneagram is thought about is looking at the different triads and the different just inherent patterns, and kind of like looking at the Enneagram in a larger context than just trying to be like, what's the basic fear, what's the basic desire, what's this, what's
Right.
this,
Right.
because that's like what often leads people into these holes of wrong identification without seeing something kind of in a context way. And I mean, even like typing approach with like the collages and these interviews, and there's this sort of I kind of feel like the not all, but a lot of that, like if we're distinguishing like a kind of like a masculine thinking style versus a feminine thinking style, that kind of like pulling away at the specific thing, like really did not, like at least in terms of how the Enneagram was taught and understood, did not have enough of that feminine thinking quality. And so it really kind of went way too far into pigeonholing itself into a lot of wrong info. And then to like kind of make the Enneagram work and to correct for some of the issues that are out there, that kind of feminine contextual, seeing how all the parts fit into something larger and something outside. It's like, and that's like the Enneagram itself. It has those intervals, those shock points where it does require that kind of evolving awareness to keep moving along the octave.
Yeah. I think what you're saying is like a really good explanation of how when we just treat the Enneagram as a system of acquiring knowledge, and it's like I need to memorize the 47 things about each type, we actually pull up and out of ourselves. Like it's not actually connected to something. And there's this, I was reviewing some stuff in preparation for this, of course. And there's this line in Magical Child where he says, acquisition of content is an obsession with adults who have no matrix. And he talks about sort of like the collapsing of like a child's like intent to just like go out and explore the world. But like, if you don't feel held by something, you got to have something else to grasp onto.
Okay.
And, so our culture is kind of obsessed with acquiring content to replace the fact that we're not connected to something deeper and more real.
Yeah, I really like, I think somebody had left a review about our podcast being like a really right brain approach. And it reminds me of this sort of like feminine thinking where it's like, I think, as you mentioned, John, like people come to the Enneagram, it's like, well, what are the types? What are the basic fears? What are this, all these sort of like paint by the numbers thing. And you have some sort of an idea, but you don't actually have a real sense for it. So like, for example, if somebody were to ask, what is love? You're like, oh, let's go to the Merriam dictionary and look up what love is. But you can convey love through text, through music, through images. Like you can envelop somebody in the experience of what love is in a way that you can't even explain through words. And to show people, that the Enneagram is so real that there are all these different facets that you can experience your instincts, your types, through art or through collages or through videos and through all these different expressions that you can become enveloped by the Enneagram. The Enneagram then can then start to penetrate you, and it's not just a collection of, content or definitions. It becomes like a living, breathing thing now. So yeah, I think that's pretty cool that we're predominantly a bunch of dudes who are employing some feminine style of exploring something like this. I mean, I think it's required. You need it. You have to explore the Enneagram in this way because it is such a internally vast system.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And, the locus of Egypt is very much about this marriage of masculine and feminine within ourselves. And so, I think when we see people who do have deep content knowledge, and then they also have this deep experiential knowledge, then you get the full picture of the feminine. And if you're missing either one of those, you're missing a part.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was, I don't know where this is going, but, and this might be totally somewhere else, so pull me back. But
it's going to be totally somewhere else.
Yeah. Okay, so
we're used to it, John.
So, in media lately, Jeffrey Dahmer's come up a lot, right? And then serial killers in general. And one of the weird, fascinating things about serial killers is the way they get fans.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking, I'm very disturbed by this, right? Just of all the weird shit to get interested in, and if you've watched that show, Jeffrey Dahmer is talking about what a loser he is who didn't do anything with his life, and yet he's got a show about him. He's got fans. He's got endless content about him, which is I think I watched the show, but I think it's fucking sick that they made the show,
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, what has struck me was especially something about an animus projection on Jeffrey Dahmer, right? And what I mean by that is that for people that aren't familiar with these ideas or whatever, it's Jung kind of describes the masculine as pursuing its own counterpart, its own soul, in what he called the anima, right? And conversely, the I don't know how to talk about this without talking about gendered whatever, but that the woman is seeking her own soul, her own power, her own center in an image called the animus, and it's there's a path for both males and females to integrate their opposite energy and to have this inner alchemical marriage. And yeah, and Ted Bundy, it was another one, and I've heard people being he's so hot, and saying stuff like this, and being Ted Bundy could abduct me or whatever, it's and that's a thing that's out there, and so there's a couple things that come to me around this. I mean, just that projection thing, but I think one of the things that it kind of speaks to is, if there's an animus projection on somebody that's so fucked up, it's it's kind of I don't remember how Jung describes it, but there's for the unintegrated masculine, the projected, and I think this goes for men and women and everybody in between, but the unintegrated masculine gets projected outward as either a brute, right, or a savage person or a criminal, or a totally emasculated, weak, empty something. And it's kind of with from the unintegrated anima point of view, it's the Madonna whore, right? And how I think these happen just collectively, we're just not regardless of male or female, these are getting projected in these really pathetic ways, right? These just getting projected out there, and we're relating to them in Does this make sense where I'm going, kind of?
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, to me, it reads of this crisis of disembodiment, right? These energies, sexual energies, violent energies, they carry a huge charge. And, we all want to feel alive. And if we,
Right.
again, if we can't find a way to feel alive in a way that supports our life, we will find ways to do it that are destructive of life, right?
Mm.
And this actually keys into something that I wanted to talk about is that one of the things that Maya Luna talks about is that the primordial goddesses were goddesses of Eros and Wrath.
Mm.
And she calls them the red energies, right? And they're these
Yeah.
like tremendously powerful embodied energies that, human beings really desire to be in contact with them. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about the archetype of 2 and the connection or disconnection from 4 and 8, because I think that's a way of talking about that. So like if we look at the archetype of 2, like the fixated 2 is sort of like the embodiment of not the feminine, but femininity, like a patriarchal version. Like she's sweet, she's kind, she cares about other people, right? It's kind of like this really tiny box for the feminine.
Mhm.
I think of the 2 archetype as what I call the bright feminine. It's like, this like sunshiny, like love, attunement, right? If we're talking about it in the more expansive sense, it's like this this absolute beauty of being loved and paid attention to in a way that we all need is nourishing, right? And then ideally that archetype is also connected to the 4, which I think of as the dark feminine, right? It's this place of sensuality and intimacy, and Eros kind of like lives in that archetype. And then the 8 is the fierce feminine. And those are the archetypes that we were talking about last time, like Kali and Sekhmet. Sekhmet has the head of a lioness. And so if you think about the energy of a lioness, like she is so fierce. She hunts, she protects her cubs, like that whole thing of the mama bear. Like you don't want to get close to a cub when there's a mama bear around, or you're going to get that kind of ferocity. And so the feminine has been disconnected from the dark feminine and the fierce feminine, which are that Eros and Wrath, right? And like we see this even in religion, right? Like if we come from Isis, which had this real fullness of she brings Osiris back with sexuality, and she's kind of like a full embodying that full power, and then she becomes the Virgin Mary, the Immaculate Conception. Where her relationship with the masculine, like the 2 icons of Mary are, with the baby Jesus on her lap, or the Pietà with the dead Jesus on her lap, right? And she gets, it's funny, I tried to look for a word that means this in the feminine sense, and I can't find it. Like she gets castrated from the fullness of who she is, right? She gets castrated from Eros, she gets castrated from ferocity and wrath. And she lives in this little box. And again, it's not to say anything bad about the energy of Mary, or that energy of love, but just that when we put things in a box, the other energies want to leak out, right? And I know you've talked about this a lot, John, especially with the sexual instinct, that like when we suppress it, it leaks out in ways that we don't intend or anticipate, because we're still after those energies and we don't know how to get them. Yeah. Anyway, like it's just, I think we're seeing more and more that people do have quite a death obsession in our society, and this move towards nihilism.
One thing that's really strange about that for me, coming from Nigeria, is that even as a young child, I was very much aware of death. Like death is, I think most people who grew up in third world countries are very much aware of death because it's just, you're not as separated from death as a reality. Like you kill an animal to get food. You go to the store here to get meat. And so one of the strangest things I've ever seen was walking into a supermarket store and seeing slabs of meat packaged already ready to go. Because when you go to a butcher, they fucking slice off the piece of meat that you want and they hand it to you. So it's just a very different, I mean, here you can live your whole life and be sheltered from the reality that things have to die in order for you to live, or that there's a death consequence for certain things that happen. I remember as a kid, I watched an execution in the town square, standing or on my dad's shoulder. They caught some robbers and they chopped their heads off, and it was just like, you know. So I guess what I'm trying to say, what I was trying to say is that there is such an obsession with death here because I think most people live their lives without any conscious encounter with death whatsoever. So a serial killer is a really exotic thing here, whereas in Nigeria there are people that are getting chopped up by machete vigilante killers today. That's still happening. There's certain days that if you go out and you're caught by someone like, you know, the Muslims killing people who are Christian, they'll ask you if you're Christian or not, and if this guy with a machete is going to chop you up in broad daylight. So that doesn't seem so, because death is such a present reality in a lot of places in the world. A serial killer is just like fucking Tuesday. There's a bunch of serial killers, and you know, no one's doing a fucking documentary in Nigeria about some guy who's chopping people up because that's just a thing that happens.
That's just your neighbor.
That's just people disappear all the time. No one's investigating. People are still getting, you know, cannibalism still exists as a thing in certain parts of that world. And so, you know, Dahmer is kind of like such an extreme character because people don't have any consciousness or have no encounter with people who kill people. It's not a thing here.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's such a dissociation between the cycle of material life, and again, people still have these energies still live in us, and we have to find some way to process and integrate them. And the more we've tried to insulate ourselves from life, you know, has all these unintended consequences, where it actually makes us less. You know, some things are a lot easier, right? But it doesn't necessarily mean that it's healthier for us or, you know, better for the kind of full integration of everything that we are.
Yes. You can see it in other scenarios like the rampant pedophilia in Christianity, you know, that energy coming out and like the complete, like, because it's so imprisoned and that it oozes out in such an inappropriate and harmful way. It's kind of the same thing.
One thing too is, and this complicates it, and maybe this is part of the hook, but like talking, you know, the subject of women that get obsessed with these serial killers and actually have a sexual attraction and there's sexual heat for them, is that's an aspect of female sexuality, is that wanting to be taken piece. And so I think there's a hook there. You know what I mean? I don't know how to pull those things apart. If there's a clean way to dissect those from each other.
Well, one of the things I'm hearing from what Julie's speaking about is this aspect of surrender and allowing, and this aspect of being in the midst of things dissolving, and how, like, maybe in the same way that, you know, like Emeka's speaking to with this like lack of relationship to death, creating a weird death drive, you know, it may be a similar thing of where we don't have real areas where we can be kind of in a mysterious space or a mysterious allowing or orientation, that there's a way that where it's like trying to through the, like, you know, like a projection on a serial killer is an imagination thing. It's a fantasy. And so it's like projecting something like that could be like a way that people try to imaginally orient towards some kind of real big surrender. Because I was thinking too, the other day about like another figure of the patriarchy or whatever is Donald Trump, and how something like Trump or Dahmer to me represent like they get a certain energy with them because they seem like they are somehow defying, not defying in the sense of rebelling against, but just outside of our kind of highly systematized meat packed in a grocery store.
That's true.
Everything in cellophane, kind of like, removed trajectory where we're all just like trying to pay our bills and like have like have our relationships work, like in this sense of kind of just trying to keep things together, and that everything in our current world is like overly systematized, and there's not a lot of room for genuine deviation outside of something like a really my credit score will get fucked up, or my police record, or like surveillance camera, or my online presence, or whatever. It's all like so documented and whatever, that these people sometimes represent somebody who is not seemingly bound by those
boxes.
Unfettered.
Well, it's
But
the uncontrolled id, right?
Yeah.
It's the uncontrolled instinctual energies that we have been socialized to control so deeply. But again, as meat, we have those desires, we have that need to express, and very little room in our culture. And so then we end up admiring people who are actually sociopaths because they don't have any superego around it, because we can't figure out how to integrate those energies. And I think I just took this class about anger, and one of the most interesting pieces about it for me was about being in touch with and circulating this energy. So that our usual approach to anger is either we suppress it or we cathart it. And both of those are damaging and don't keep us in touch with the actual intelligence of the anger, right? Like anger is an energy that we need to protect ourselves. And, that ferocity has been taken away from women. Like, it's not okay to be an angry woman. And then she's not protected. She's unprotected. Like, she doesn't have her fangs. She's not a mama bear, And so learning to actually be in touch with these energies and to circulate them within us is the antidote for looking out and trying to and projecting my energy onto something that actually really is harmful and sucks. And one of the learnings from my Indian philosophy study is that, like, the feminine inherently has power. Like, we're talking about these, the incredible elemental power of nature, the power to, develop and birth a child. But her authority has been removed. She has power, but no authority. She doesn't, right? And, part of the work, especially for women, but not always just women, is really reclaiming that power and on a very physical level, right? And being able to stay in and circulate those energies, even if they feel threatening to other people, right? The erotic energy, the fierce energy is perceived as a threat to the status quo, and it gets shut down. And then and then why are we worshiping these crazy people? So, I mean, I think all of us, the feminine in all of us there is this energy of allowing and receiving, but it's not a passive receptivity. It's an active receptivity. And I think that's something we mistake about the feminine, that makes us identify receptivity with either violence or weakness.
It's like choosing what to receive. Like what influences do I put myself under, or what do I say yes to as
Mhm.
the receptive one?
Mhm. Yeah. I think I was thinking about this, that, I know I'm sure you guys have talked about the law of three, and, John, how in the Gurdjieff work it gets talked about that um, personality is usually the assertive force and essence is the denying force. And that in order to develop, that needs to be reversed, right? Essence needs to be the
That's a
affirming
force.
force. And so I think it's the same thing. Like we think of the masculine as the affirming force and the feminine as the denying force, and that denying force shows up as weakness, passivity, like a lack of complete lack of agency is what it gets identified with. But first of all three of those forces are needed. They're all important forces in the development of something new. And I think if the feminine becomes more of the affirming force, that there's like this engaged receptivity to life, rather than like I just want something to come in and fill me. It's like I'm here and ready to participate in this dance.
I'm interested, Julie, Nancy, or Alexandra, to hear. Like, I can kind of easily speak to, and I think it's very much on display in culture, like the masculine wounding of not having the feminine integrated. But I was curious about your experiences of like being women, like in within our culture's relationship or lack of relationship with the feminine. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I could start. And so I will say for myself that I learned at a very young age that it didn't feel like the feminine was wanted. And I very much took on the masculine. Like I have a lot of masculine energy. And it's been quite a journey for me to trust the feminine energy arising through me. To deal with my internalized misogyny about the feminine. And at the same time, like, in this class I was taking around anger, and especially because of the point that I occupy, I've been working a lot with this 9 energy of inertia. And that, like, even though I know I'm powerful and capable, there's a part of me that just kind of goes to sleep to that basic life force, that kind of unconsciously feels, like just growing up, I could see in the family and religion and school and institutions, like I was constantly pushing against, like trying to prove myself on the terms of the masculine, rather than kind of trusting also this integration of feminine. And so like a lot of my journey has been kind of opening more to that feminine, and then I think there's an opportunity to integrate the real masculine and not the distorted masculine.
Yeah, I relate a lot to that experience as well, Julie. Growing up in like the church, there's one version of the feminine and that's it. And all I knew that it was at that point was that's not me, therefore I cannot be feminine. And so it was very much like I viewed it as had a lot of internalized misogyny that I had to just take off, and then my understanding of the feminine became very like one-dimensional and like a play to put on because it was so foreign to me. And now, like, as I've kind of learned a little bit more about it and kind of allowed myself to play in both realms freely, I'm starting to get a bit more comfortable with like my femininity and being, masculine and feminine at the same time, and kind of playing in that realm. But I still don't. I mean, it feels very clumsy to me. Feels very disconnected. I know how to be masculine and that's it, and I know how to be one feminine and that's it. So,
yeah, with me, the knowing how to be one feminine was my experience also, but even that, it was like a specific brand of feminine that had to erase the dark feminine, and really resonated with that dark feminine and a fierce feminine. So the ways that I had to carry myself in feminine energy and be feminine was like not being active at all, not exploring any kind of like any fierce, any kind of fierce part of myself. So in a way, it was this distorted feminine presence because I had to appear meek and soft and, very boxed in to one place, but not actually be that way. I'm not sure quite how to explain it, but it was like, it had to be an appearance, but I didn't feel that way. It felt very put on and very performative. Yeah. There's something else, even, I think we mentioned it, I think somebody mentioned it last week, of even just sexual selection and how females and women, or, whatever the language for it is now, are the sexual selectors. And what is the phrasing that you used earlier? Active receptivity?
Actively receptive, yeah.
Actively receptive. That resonated a lot with me because I don't think my active participation was welcomed. Or even wanted. So a lot of it was passive receptivity, because I guess the connection that I'm making is that even in any kind of active energy just did not seem wanted, even in active reception. So I spent a lot of my time like waiting to be chosen by masculine energy versus standing in a feminine strength and realizing that I'm the one that's supposed to be doing the choosing.
Yeah, and I think along those same lines, there's a level of disconnect that came with my experience, a disconnect from knowing what to choose and knowing what is being put towards you. Because Brian and I were actually talking about this today, how masculine presenting people often don't catch vibes, like they don't catch on to things like feminine presenting people often more easily do. And I think that's the feminine energy, just being able to receive and then know what they're receiving. And so being disconnected from it, you just like, it's like a skill you knew once, but like it's rusty.
Very interesting.
Yeah, there's another part in sort of my experience also is like with masculine presenting people, there was like a loud awareness that there was not feminine integration, which meant that the masculine energy was just threatening and could not contain a real embodied feminine presence in myself. So instead I had to kind of stay on guard and sort of like, I don't know, is that making sense? Like I had to sort of stay like on guard and protected while still feigning femininity.
Yes.
But not actually getting to indulge in the mess of, that is being feminine, because this masculine energy was not integrated in a feminine way.
I don't want to interrupt if anybody's got more to riff on that, but I was curious about kind of two things, which is one, Julie and Nancy specifically mentioned internalized misogyny, and I was just curious what that looked like or what that experience was or how that is. And then the second thing I'm interested in is like, what has helped y'all as women to heal those wounds around the feminine, or those one note archetypes, or what is it? I'm blanking on a word, but it kind of like the way it's like the
misinterpretations.
The interpretations that you were the outlets, the social outlets that you were set that society said was like the appropriate expressions of the feminine.
Yeah, so it's interesting. My entrance onto this path came with having children and trying to do what I thought was required to show that like women are just as good as men, like being in this very high pressure corporate job. And I thought I was going to be an example for women, right? And then I had these two small children who were just like, children are immediate and they let you know what they need. They're kind of life force themselves. And I my body started telling me like, this is not good for you. Like, what are you doing? And I don't know if anything else could have really, like, my personality structure really works well with consensus reality. It's pretty strong and hard. And I'm not sure, like, if anything else might have really brought me to my knees in the same way that having children did. And I remember, like, it was at about the time that Sheryl Sandberg was writing that book, Lean In, about women leaning into work. And I think what I learned from having children was like, well, who's leaning into taking care of our children? And why don't we value that? Because like, isn't the whole way our society is organized because we don't value that? Like, people don't get the care and the love and the attunement that they need to actually grow into healthy human beings. And so I think the beginning of my education there came with like being forced to be in contact with like two little beings who were pretty unrelenting and letting me know like what their needs are and what was wanted and needed in life. It was hard. I remember, so when I actually negotiated 3 days a week in my job and got some pushback from the powers that be, like, are you sure about that? But most people were shocked, but they were supportive. And I remember being really afraid to tell my parents. And the narrative I had in my mind is like, oh, it turns out that I'm just a girl. I'm just a girl and I have to take care of my children. And so like, that's a really good example of internalized misogyny, I think. That like we so devalue that, like, if you don't work outside the home, like, yeah, you're something lesser. And I'm not saying anything about the choices people should make about working or taking care of children, but just that's a really clear example of how that showed up in me. And I kind of had to get like bashed over the head until I really got that.
I fucking felt that when you said that like is like an arrow to the chest when you said I'm just a girl. That was like, oh, that was such a similar experience to, I feel like I just keep saying that I had a similar experience and that's like all I need to say, but but
ditto.
I did. I had a very similar experience. Yeah, no, I was in a corporate-ish job and it was mostly men and I was expected to, be a certain way and act a certain way. And I couldn't keep up because my body does not function on a 9-to-5 schedule. It just cannot. Like, I am not built for that. And it wasn't even a 9-to-5 schedule. It was more high powered than that or whatever. So I got like really sick from working so much and I had to like quit my job and I had to like move back in with my parents. And yeah.
Not moving back with my parents, but getting sick and quitting my job.
Yeah. And the line that I'm sure I've said it on this podcast before, I've said it to a lot of people, but it just rings in my head forever and ever. And I don't think he remembers this at all. But my boss told me as I was quitting, he said, if you wanted to be respected like a man, you need to act like one.
Whoa.
Yeah. And it was... Yeah, that was the moment that is like so clear in my head that just flipped a switch. Where it's like what I thought in my head all the time to myself was spoken back to me, and I realized how ridiculous it was. And it just kind of like, I say that's the moment that radicalized me. I started just going full in. I was like, well, then obviously I'm never going to be a man. So let's fucking lean into this. So I was like, I'm going to start doing sex work. I'm just going to start taking money from you fucking men.
She became a villain.
I went in full
villain story.
Dahmer.
Villain origin story. Yeah.
I'm going to start taking money from you.
Abigail, what is that thing you said earlier? Those like unfortunate final words or something like that?
There you go. Yeah.
Comments or posts preceding unfortunate events.
Unfortunate events. Yeah, those are that man's unfortunate comments preceding unfortunate events. Then Nancy became a villain.
See, I see where your cold heart comes from now. I understand.
Nancy, you good?
She hasn't been since that dude said that.
Is Nancy, is your thing working?
I think we lost her. She's not here.
No. She'll be back.
Yeah.
Alexandra, did you want to say something about that?
Yeah. My internalized misogyny more came behaviorally for me in ways that I was sort of editing myself and honestly just like denying very loud parts of myself. I used to not be identified with being sensitive. I don't know how.
Most sensitive woman.
Me neither. Me neither.
Yeah.
Somebody once told me I had really big feelings, and I'm like, I don't think so.
I know. I was like, you're lying. I remember, so my mom is a very expressive person. She's a very emotional person. She's very uninhibited in her emotional expression. And I saw it just as like a very messy thing. That's neither here nor there, but a lot of ways that I sort of repressed myself because these were feminine aspects of myself that I thought were not welcome or seen as a bad thing or something was, my sensitivity, my intuition, and my emotions, and like my emotional expression. And like even now, for some reason, there's like emotion coming up. So yeah, it was a lot of just like putting that side of me away, a lot of trying to focus on like logic instead. So now I have like red flags anytime somebody says that they're like logic oriented. I'm like, what are you denying of yourself? Nobody's fucking that way. Yeah. Those are the main ways that I see it in myself, that there's like a very messy quality that I have that I still have a self-judgment about. But in the expression of those kind of messy emotions, I do find a lot of insight, and I find a lot of like honoring of self that I was very, very much negating and very much neglecting for myself for a long time. And as far as what has helped that, I'm not quite sure. I think just like a lot of time getting sick of it, getting like, just kind of being over it. Of course, now I'm with John, and John is like very welcoming of that side of me, which is really nice. And it makes it feel very safe for me to just be like a disaster woman sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. So I want to talk a little bit about practice and relative to what we're talking about. Because I think there are ways that we can practice in masculine modes or feminine modes that can help with what we're talking about. And there's actually a blog post that I wrote when we were doing New York Enneagram, and it's on my website now, called Balancing Your Practice for Strength, Resilience, Creativity, and Freedom. And what I talk about is like two general categories of practice. One that I call tight structure practice, which is like a masculine encoded practice, right? And those are things like the Gurdjieff movements, where there's like a very specific form, like do it this way. And the movements are very angular and precise. And, in the post, I talk about like thinking about your Enneagram type and your stack in terms of like, is that the kind of practice that might be helpful for you, right? And then I talk about another set of practices that I call simple frame practices, which are more feminine encoded practices, where there's like just a small edge, like integrative breathwork, I think of as a simple frame practice. It's like a simple frame is like breathe in a circle without a pause between the inhale and the exhale. That's like, in a way, the whole thing. And then there's like a whole there's a gazillion possibilities that could come out of that. And so I think these different ways of practicing teach you to either be more expressive and to like really open up, or to really kind of come in and channel your energy. And so like for myself, coming from Self-Pres 6, like both of those are very structured. And so it's been really helpful for me leaning into my creativity, leaning into breath work, like to just open up into expression and being with, whatever comes, and feeling much more comfortable about that. Whereas like I could see, for example, somebody coming from Sexual 4, like both of those are much more expansive, formless. Doing a more tight structure practice might really help like channel and focus that energy. And so if you're interested in more ideas about like those different kinds of practices and what are the pros and cons of doing things in different ways, you might find that blog post helpful and interesting.
Cool.
Nancy, were you going to say something before things got cut out, or finish saying something?
No, I don't think I was gonna really say anything other than wrap that up and say I went full villain era and leaned into it, and that's how I started growing. But yeah, no, I don't think so. But thank you for checking.
Where are you on your villain arc story, Nancy?
I think I'm leaning. I've gone full onto the dark side, and now I'm finding where I'm comfortable somewhere, not so much in the middle, but closer to the softer side.
So you're no longer a murderer?
Yeah.
Whoa, you can't say that on air, man.
She's taking
You
enough
weren't
men's
supposed
money.
to know that.
Oh, okay.
She's breaking hearts.
Yeah,
I thought everyone
I've
knew about
scared
the
enough
bodies in the
people.
backyard. Okay.
Yeah, no. That's why I moved out of the country.
See, there are other motivations for moving to the Netherlands. I understand now.
Yeah, don't dig up my backyard. I wouldn't recommend it.
We were just trying to figure out why you would move to bad internet, but now I understand.
Yeah, no, take that up with my landlord. Not my choice.
Move away from high-speed internet. She's trying to run away from the law.
Yeah, they can't catch me out here in Brumman.
I bet most of Europe has better internet than the United States. So
Yeah,
No, that's what I
and
thought, too.
it's pretty much everywhere too. You
the
can get it
infrastructure here
everywhere.
is crumbling.
Yeah, very quickly.
Yeah. Any last thoughts before we wrap this up?
No, I'm good. That's what I wanted to say.
Well, thanks for coming on, Julie,
Thanks
and
for having me.
Yeah, thank you.
This has been great.
illuminating
Yeah, it's great.
the archetypal feminine and being somebody else who speaks Egypt stuff. That's been actually very cool to like
Warms your heart.
warms my heart,
Yeah.
and it's great to for people to hear somebody who's not like this deranged idiot that they might listen to frequently talk about. Well, with the Osiris resurrection.
Actually, if you look at this pharaoh and he's
Actually-
pointing at the dots, can't you see?
10,500 BC.
Obscure facts about Egypt.
Yeah.
Just thrown into the middle for no apparent reason.
Actually, the Egyptians conceived of time as a circle, and
Julie, did you get a chance to listen to the episode we did with Curtis?
I did, yeah.
Would you have any interest in doing an episode with just you and Curtis, and we just sit there and listen to see what happens?
Sure, I would love to do that.
That would be
cool.
awesome.
That'd be awesome. That's a great idea.
Yeah.
Yeah,
great.
that would be.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I've wanted to return to that. Curtis's like escape from motherland,
Mhm.
the
Yes.
masculine, and so like what would be like the feminine version, and how do those
yeah.
things relate, and what?
Yeah, that would be so interesting.
and,
Yeah.
and now
there
it's-
is a book called Leaving My Father's House.
leaving life.
And I say that it would have to be you and Curtis because there's not enough room for any of us to get any words in if Curtis comes back on.
I know. It would have to just.
I did
be
notice
Curtis.
that when I listened to that episode. I was like, wow, where is everybody else?
15-minute monologue.
We also need to give him a speed injection or something.
Yeah.
Oh man,
it's
editing
David
that one.
from a 9.
Says
so,
David.
Yeah,
So,
jeez.
some
Yeah, if
really
David
needs
is saying
Idiot.
that. Oh God.
Editing that
Put in
one
our
was
regular
like,
listeners.
Holy fuck. And also just like how social blind he was, because it almost feel like you're getting dragged into a corner. I was like, can we come up for air, please?
Yeah. I've never heard you guys be so quiet.
Yeah, I completely went to another plane while he was talking. I was like, I can't stay here with him.
Yeah, I thought it was great, but yeah, he can riff.
Yeah.
But it'd be fun to see you and him go back and forth. I think it'd be really cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that'd be great too.
And we've only been doing recording with the video for like 3 pods so far. We've always done it like without the video on.
Way more fun.
Yeah, and it's way more fun. And also, I think that Curtis would be more receptive.
Yeah.
If
No, that's
he was
true.
on camera. You know what I'm saying?
Or you could raise your hand. Hey, say something here, buddy.
It's easier to interrupt when you can see.
Yeah, or
the
he could
other people.
just see that there are other people that he needs to interact
Those are
with.
blind. You gotta like,
He's not just alone in his brain.
Circling in.
I thought that this was a thing that you guys started while I was gone just to spite me. I came back and I was like, why are we all using our videos?
Well,
We
it's
did it-
funny, John, because like when you said that, originally you told me we weren't going to be usually using videos, and I really had like a social instinct contraction, like, oh my God, I'm not going to be able to connect with folks. Like, I'm just like I said to John, like, can we talk? Because like we haven't talked in a while, and I'm just going to be talking to a black screen, and I'm just going to be like,
Yeah. We did it with Courtney, and it like when I listened to it, it felt like, oh, this is like, it feels like it has more life, and
you can hear
hear that we're like almost like in the same room together. And I
there's
was
a
like,
conversation. Wow.
It's much easier to see what's going to happen.
Yeah,
it's like a conversation.
How do people do this?
Also, it was just so fitting that it was a social 6 that was like, let's do videos. I want to see your
Yeah.
guys' faces.
Yeah. Right.
And you guys are like, okay, I guess we'll do that. And now you all like it.
The live pods have a different energy because it's easier to talk when you can see people for some reason.
Yeah.
And so I was
For
like,
some reason, he's just completely befuddled by that fact.
actually, there's
Not
a
at all. We
connection
aren't visual
between
creatures at
people.
all.
yeah, right. We're just discovering basic human communication skills here.
And basic human things about ourselves.
Oh,
I mean, for real.
bizarre.
Blind boys.
Real. I mean, the last like year, 2 years, even talking about like through the lens of instinct, like real relationships.
Yeah.
You know, like we're just figuring out what a relationship is. You know,
You guys are cute.
and all its facets. You know, like romantic, just regular friendships and stuff like this. And yeah, it is interesting because somebody, I think Emeka, you said earlier in recording this, like how fucked up everybody is.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like we all are just like fucking
In our own
children
ways.
that don't know what we're doing. And I mean, it's just crazy how much we keep unpacking the layers and layers of just all these images we're given of how to be.
Yeah.
People are just kind of pantomiming, and there's very little inner stuff. And so, like, I don't know. I feel like a lot of the content that we've discussed and explored has been really valuable from that point of view. You know, that it's like I do feel like we're getting at something realer, and so I love that. Like, even though we're an Enneagram podcast, we're talking all about like real like. I feel like we're living into what we talked about at the very, very beginning of making this podcast, which is like Enneagram's just a small part where we're talking about kind of everything with just these lenses.
Well, it's also getting into what Julie was talking about earlier, is that we're actually having an experience with this whole progression, you know, with this podcast, and you're seeing us learn new things, and we're not just like, we're teaching you the Enneagram, and here's the facts.
Here's a type 6.
Yeah.
Even just the fact that we're doing a podcast, I don't think people realize just appearing on video on a weekly basis, how uncomfortable that was initially. Like, to get to the point where, I'm comfortable being recorded, and I'm comfortable being recorded on video. That shit was hard, you know. And it's also kind of like mirroring to me like my own discomfort with being perceived.
Yes.
You know, just like, what the fuck is that? Because it seems so irrational. Because I mean, you see social types who get on video and they're just like, come alive, and I'm just like, dude, why do I not want to be seen? What is going on? or just share my thoughts with people out there. But yeah, this has been last couple of years, just been discovering the social instinct through doing this. My own relationship to a social instinct and being like a public figure of some kind.
Yeah. It's taught us all a lot.
All right. Well, social instinct is a little depleted on this end.
Yeah.
Come on, we're just getting started.
Abrupt Irish goodbye.
Come on, I'm online now.
It took Alexandra a long time to warm up, but she's finally.
Hey, Alexandra, I have a suggestion. Take all this energy. And take all this energy and funnel into it in an OPS video. Why don't you do that?
Okay. All right. Sure, I'll do it. Haha. Duh, Emika. I can do it on time.
No, you can't. Please. I don't believe you.
So for reference, Emika's been trying to get me to record an OPS video, and
every month
I'm just like, yeah, okay, duh, like chill out.
Right, just chill out.
Okay. And yesterday, for some reason, I thought September had 31 days.
Oh my God.
Of course.
Nines just make up their own reality to avoid work.
Right.
So I was like, he's being dramatic. And then I got a message, what was it, yesterday? From me yesterday of a Kanye gift, just like scornfully shaking his head, and I was like, shit, I did it again. Damn it, I'm disappointed, Emika, again.
Every month, can you get it done before the 1st? Of course.
Yeah, and I really tell myself sometimes that because I have a 3 fix, I'm like, I'm not that kind of 9.
Yes,
Lies
you are.
we tell ourselves.
Yes, you are. Yes,
Lies
you are.
we tell ourselves. Yes.
It's going to take you a whole lifetime to get it done. Everybody's getting typed except for you.
It'll happen when it happens.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yes.
Everybody's
When
doing
the time is right, it'll
Everything
happen.
happens for a reason.
Yeah, just have some faith.
It's divine timing.
It's divine timing.
All right, I'm gonna go. Y'all can hang out. I'm gonna go. It's great. Julie, for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, John. See you guys.
Later.
Thanks, Julie. Bye.